Oh, girl,
All
you got
right.
everything. You know what I'm using? I'm using my vitamin D lamp
Oh, it's funny.
because I'm like, and it literally short. It definitely does not work
All
to
right.
give me vitamin D, but it does work to give me some light.
Okay.
Hi there, everyone. Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to Pass the Mic with Mohsen. We're having a conversation with Camille Proctor from Color of Autism, and she's the founder and CEO of Color of Autism, and she's going to have a wonderful, candid conversation with us today. Camille, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and the mission of Color of Autism?
Hi, thank you for having me. Yes, my name is Camille Proctor, and I'm the executive director and founder of the Color of Autism Foundation. And I'm the mother of two children, one typical and one atypical child named Ari. And I founded my organization because in 2008, my son Ari was diagnosed with autism. And at that time, there weren't any support groups to address some of the issues that I was going through within my own community. And that led me to found my organization to support families in underserved communities affected by autism.
I'm so proud of you for doing that because I also am a mother of children of two, one atypical and one not neurotypical. And I've also had difficulty with this. And so I can see that this organization was necessary. And I'm so glad that you did that. Will you tell us some of the things that you guys do? What kind of population do you aim to support?
So we do support groups. We run support groups. We also do a lot of parent training. Because I found that it's much easier to go on this journey if you have the right resources, right? Because so often when we begin this journey, we don't have resources and we don't have peers
Absolutely.
to support us properly. So we do parent trainings, which run for 6 weeks. It's mandatory that you take all 6 weeks.
Okay.
You can't just drop in for the things you think you want to take. You have to take all 6 weeks because the goal is to make you a peer support person. So that means you'll be able to go out into your community and support someone else that's going through the same journey.
Wow, that is important work. What other things are you guys doing?
So currently now, in addition to that, we also do police. Well, we had previously done police training. We kind of put a halt to that because it needs to be revamped because there's so much going on that we have to really take a look at the systemic racism.
Absolutely.
That's kind of embedded in the police, right? So that's on hold as of now. But we also do other things like transition services. We support individuals who are on the spectrum who are adults. So we support adult autistics, finding them meaningful employment, teaching them how to code. So we do wraparound services. We do quite a bit.
Wow, all of those things are much needed in our community. So would you shed some light on some of the challenges that Black families specifically have with autism?
Well, I think that with Black families, as well as any other minority family, some of the difficulties are coming to terms with a disability. It's something that many ethnicities are just ashamed of. Having conversations, prepping people to have the conversation with their family on how they need to support properly. Getting access to care, that's a big issue. Access to care is, I'd probably say, the biggest problem because many of the therapy clinics aren't in the inner city. And if they are in the inner city, they're at capacity. And so then you have parents that are on wait lists, they don't have transportation. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And then when you talk about inner city schools, they don't have the same amount of resources that like a suburban school would have. So for example, in Detroit, there aren't that many autism classrooms. I think there's maybe 1 or 2. I'm not even sure about the 1 or 2.
Wow. And there's probably a ton of kids who are autistic in Detroit.
Absolutely. And so what ends up happening is that they'll go in a room in a special education class with like 20 kids. Kids with autism learn completely different.
Yeah, absolutely. They do. And okay. And what are some other, do you have some like statistics that you can share with us that like are affecting this community specifically differently than our other peers?
Well, yes. So, for example, children, African American children, typically get diagnosed between the ages of 4 and 5 with autism. So that's 2 to 3 years later. And
Yeah.
some children don't even get diagnosed until they get into the school system.
Wow. So much, much later than their other peers.
Much, much later.
And why do you
And
think that is?
when we speak in terms of support for families, it's just different. It's just different because I think that in a therapeutic world, they don't understand that parents don't understand languages that they don't understand the language of, they don't understand medical jargon, right? So when you start saying things like discrete trial and things like that, they don't understand what that means. And I just made my camera go goodbye. I don't know what just happened. So they don't understand what some of these things mean.
Yeah.
And we try to get parents and the support systems to be, I don't know, more in sync, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
because I think oftentimes the supports, they don't understand that mom may have one child with autism and 3 typical kids, and she still has to run her household, right?
Yeah.
So one of my more interesting examples of how this doesn't work well, I'll give you the example of a Muslim family who's first generation to the United States. And I say this because I do support Muslim families because they need the support because you're people of color, right?
And they're struggling in a country that's not something that's familiar to them.
Absolutely. But one of the biggest problems is just the level of condescension.
Yeah.
So I'll give you, there's a little boy. He's my favorite little person. His name is Mahmoud. And so I've known him since he was very small, when his family first came to this country. And his mom was concerned because they talk over her because she's learning English. And so I would come into the therapy clinic where he was at to do observations with him. And I would see him. And since he's my he is my favorite person.
Your heart.
I'll see him and I'll pick him up. I would pick him up and I'd say, Habibi Mahmoud. And he would give me a kiss and he'd give me a hug, right? And so his therapist says, I don't know what she's saying to him.
Okay.
We don't speak that here. And I said, well, his mother speaks that. And so I said that, like how she said it to me. I said, well, she speaks that. And what you should do is you should either find a therapist that speaks Arabic, or you need to ask mom and dad to give you a list of words in Arabic that they want Mahmoud to repeat. So that he learns both languages, because mom doesn't understand English that well yet, right?
Yeah.
And they're looking at me like,
a lot needs to change. I agree.
A lot needs to be changed. And so, it's not just with the African American community, it's with most communities of color. I mean, the African American community, while we're the most vocal, we're still the most underserved in terms of how we're treated. And it doesn't really help when, again, you have this whole systems of things that are just working against us. So that's why I'm very grateful that you had me on today, because I could go on and on, but the reality is that there aren't enough qualified persons of color when you start talking about the therapeutic side of things, the applied behavioral analysis, the psychologists, the centers, being accessible. I live in Detroit, Michigan. So you think of Detroit as the Motor City, but believe it or not, we don't have a good public transportation system.
Wow.
It runs every 2 hours or 3 hours.
Wow.
So if you have a parent who has a child that's on the spectrum and they want to get adequate services, they have to go to the suburbs. They can't get to the suburbs if they don't have a vehicle.
And so many other systems are in place to prevent them from making it to the suburbs, right? To get that sort of access.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So those are just among some of the things that happen. And I think it's a travesty in many ways. When you look at the educational system, okay? You have a situation where in Detroit, where there's about 7,000 children that qualify for special education services. 7,000, that's one school district, right?
Yeah.
I would venture to say they have about 3 speech and language pathologists
that are like trained to work with children of autism, you're saying?
No, 3. That are 3, period. 3,
Wow.
the number 3.
Oh my goodness.
Maybe, okay, so maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe they have 5. But the reality of it is,
wow,
is that they have like maybe a few outside consultants, but the number doesn't exceed 10. And I'm being generous because I don't want to be terrible to them as a school district.
Yeah.
But the problem is that you have a parent who's very concerned and she wants what's best for her child, or he or dad, mom, whomever, they want what's best for their child, right? So they have an IEP, an individual education plan meeting, and their child is nonverbal and they want to get speech 2 or 3 times a week. And it's absolutely not possible because of the amount of students versus the amount of speech and language therapists, right? So a lot needs to be changed when we talk about inner city schools, where our tax dollars go, versus, how can I put this?
Versus the police.
Seems like, yeah, right.
Versus the police.
Right. It just seems like people just don't care.
Yes. Yes. Taking money where it is going and hurting people, to taking money and giving it to people where it's much needed. And absolutely, the services are the only way forward, getting these people the services they need, because until then we'll continue to have communities where there is suffering, and that's just not the way we want this world to go and continue. So I hear you about the lack of funding, the lack of services, the lack of just everything, all around services that are not available to people of color and Black people. But what can we do to educate our public officials, like police officers, healthcare workers, just etc. All of these people that are supposed to be serving us. How can we build that connection? How can we give this education, which unfortunately it shouldn't be up to us mothers to do this. It should be the government's job to be training these individuals to serve the community. But what can we do?
So that's a very difficult question, because I always say that we as parents, we should lobby. We should know who's in our legislature. We should know who can make a difference in our community in regards to their vote in Congress and in the Senate, correct? So that's really important. And we need to be able to say that we will withhold our vote for them if they don't do things in our community.
If they don't do their job.
Right. Well, they need to do their job, but the thing is that I've had so many conversations with over the past 4 weeks with allies, quote unquote, and a lot of my white allies will say, "What can I do?" And I say, "Hey, you don't necessarily have to go out there and march, but what I need you to do is go march to the voting polls, and I need you to pay attention to bills that are going to affect me, my son, my family, and things that will make a difference in positive changes for children and families affected by autism, or let's just say families in general. It doesn't even have to be that. In regards to the police, I hate to put it so bluntly, but we just have to teach them how to stop killing Black people first before we could train them to do anything else. 100%. Because it's just the systemic racism that is there. And I'm not saying that all cops are racist, because that's absolutely false. And I'm not saying all cops are bad, because that's absolutely false. And if someone were to break in my house right now, I'd be the first one to dial 911. But we need better systems in place so they're not targeting individuals that look differently.
Yeah.
And
And getting away with
unfortunately,
it.
right, unfortunately, I look different, you look different, and we're targets to someone at some point. And
Yeah.
so I think it's important for us collectively to do better.
Yes.
And I think if we did better as human beings, we would have better outcomes.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And I think voting is the way to go. We have to work from the inside
Mhm.
and change laws to better suit the lives of everyone, but especially people that are oppressed and underserved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's that's the only way that we'll ever be able to make a change. And I think that it's important, not just for my son, but for your son,
Yeah.
um, and for all people of
Even
color. Because I live in Michigan, and so I live in a Michigan has the largest Arabic population in the United States.
Mhm.
And so when I look, and I always have this joke because I say there's two populaces when we talk about Arab population. And
Yeah.
so the west side of town, which I refer to, that's where most of the Muslim community is, right?
Mhm.
Believe it or not, they're the ones who reach out to me the most.
I hope so, because that's what our religion teaches us.
Well, they reach out to me the most because number one, they need the services, right? Number two, they know that through me they won't be judged. Um, and they're comfortable with me because I always feel that when you can't speak in the vernacular of someone, there's other ways to communicate where they feel warm and where they feel welcome, right?
Like our children do, because my
Right,
son
right.
is nonverbal.
So for me, it's easy because I grew up in a household where we were taught you can't dislike something that you don't know about. So I am dyslexic. So one of the things that my father would do with me would make me read all the time.
Mhm.
Well, one book he gave me was called the Quran.
Mm. Wow.
So, but that was because his belief was you can't say you don't like something or that something's wrong if you don't know what it is,
Mhm.
right? So if you read and you know what the Quran says, you know that taking care of one another, being kind, are the main tenets
Yeah,
of
it's
the Quran.
absolutely. So, speaking of Muslims, how can we as a community support you? You've already said that we should use our vote. We have to use our vote and we have to vote in people that are going to take care of us, specifically our needs, and put us first for the first time because we've been neglected for so long. So, absolutely, I agree with the voting. What else can our community do for you? Because this is a mass passing the mic episode and we want to make sure we're hearing your voice and we're making sure that we're supporting you the best we can.
Well, I think the biggest thing I think the Muslim community can do is to, and don't take this the wrong way,
No,
not be hidden. Because the problem is that for years, the Muslim community has been told, please be over there. So not by just
yeah,
and 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 it's unfortunate because I think that there's a lot of enrichment that could have been given and still can be given. And I think that I want you to be just as vocal as I am. Because as my son is
hmm,
your son is my son. And that's
absolutely.
how I look at it.
Yes.
And we are family and 6 degrees of separation. And we should be taking care of one another.
Yeah.
I should make sure that nothing happens to neither one of your children, and you should make sure that nothing happens to mine,
Absolutely.
even if we have distance between us. I think that it's important that our communities take care of one another, and I think it's important that all communities take care of one another.
Yeah. Absolutely. This kind of solidarity that you're talking about, this kind of stand with each other, this kind of friendship and care and empathy for one another is very important, but also at the same time, understanding that we have differences and we look different and we have different um, backgrounds, and it's okay. And seeing each other for who we are, celebrating each other, but also just taking care of each other, just like you said, so nice and simple, so well put. I would just like to ask you, is there, I know that your organization is being funded by donations also. So I wanted to just remind you that, like, not remind you, I'm sorry. I wanted to just tell you that one of the mothers in the Mohsen organization actually raised funds for for Color of Autism in solidarity, and she was able to raise almost $5,000. So that's really great. That's a start for us. But please expect that we will be supporting you. Please reach out to us more. And I would like to remind everybody to donate to the Color of Autism .org. There's a banner underneath here. I think you can see it in orange over there. Please definitely go and donate and support this organization because they're doing important work in our community and they really need the funding. Thank you for joining us, Camille. That was so wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you for having me. And it was wonderful to talk to you. And I forgot, I have to say this. There was actually two moms that were baking.
Oh, really?
Yes. And the other mom, I only know her screen name, but I don't know what her real name is right now. And I feel so bad. But no, there's two moms. So I appreciate everyone in your community supporting me.
No, absolutely. It's our pleasure and it's our job to do this for one another as human beings.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.